Sifa rolled her eyes as she walked into the upscale restaurant in Kigali. Her mother had arranged yet another blind date, and she was getting sick of it. "Mom, I'm begging you," she whispered over the phone. "Stop setting me up. If you push me again, I swear I'll throw water in their face." "Just try this one, Sifa," her mother insisted. "He's different, I promise." Sifa sighed and took a deep breath. Dressed in a modest yet elegant African print dress, she walked toward table 66. She was supposed to meet some wealthy businessman's son, but she honestly didn't care. However, she stopped in her tracks when she saw the man sitting there. Tall, handsome, with skin smooth as dark coffee, dressed in a crisp blue suit that hugged his broad shoulders perfectly. His piercing gaze met hers, and she felt her breath hitch. "Wow," she muttered under her breath. She realized she had been staring and quickly regained her composure. Without a word, she picked up the glass of water in front of her and splashed it in his face. The man blinked, stunned. "What was that for?" "I'm sorry," Sifa said, grabbing her bag. "I really don't want to be on this blind date. This was the only way to tell my mother that I came." She turned to leave, but a firm hand grabbed her wrist. "You think you can just leave after that?" "I can compensate you," she said, flustered. The man smirked. "And how exactly are you going to compensate me? With money?" Before she could answer, a familiar voice cut through the restaurant. "Sifa, you think you can escape me?" Sifa turned and froze in horror. Her ex, Kwezi, stood there, his face full of anger. "I was already done with you, Kwezi," she snapped. "My mother said you need to pay back everything I bought for you." Sifa's jaw clenched. "You mama's boy jerk. Fine, I'll return everything, even the clothes I'm wearing if that's what you want." The man beside her chuckled. "Interesting." Before she could react, the stranger suddenly dropped to one knee. "Sifa, will you marry me?" She gaped at him in shock. "What? Who are you?" The man smiled. "My name is Kwame Chinua, but you can call me your husband." Sifa's life was about to take a turn she never expected. Sifa stood frozen, her mind struggling to process the absurdity of the moment. This stranger, Kwame Chinua, a man she had never met before, had just proposed to her in front of her ex-boyfriend, a restaurant full of people, and worst of all, her mother, who had just walked in, her eyes widening with excitement. "You see, Mama? He even proposed," her mother squealed, clasping her hands together in delight. Sifa turned to Kwame. "Are you insane?" she hissed under her breath. Kwame smirked, still kneeling. "Well, you did say you wanted to get rid of your ex. Consider this my good deed for the day." Kwezi, her ex, scoffed. "What kind of joke is this? You think marrying a random man will solve your problems?" Kwame stood up slowly, adjusting his watch. "I am Kwame Chinua of Chinua Enterprises, and I don't make jokes." A hush fell over the restaurant. Kwame Chinua. The name sent murmurs through the crowd. Even Sifa had heard of him. He was one of the richest men in East Africa, a billionaire in his early 30s, known for his intelligence, business empire, and mysterious personal life. Kwezi turned pale. "You're lying." Kwame raised an eyebrow. "Try me." Sifa's mother almost fainted with joy. "Sifa, say yes. A man like him does not come twice." Sifa felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet. How had this night turned from a blind date disaster to an unexpected engagement? "Kwame," she whispered fiercely, "I don't know you. What is your problem?" Kwame leaned in, his voice soft but firm. "Just go with it. Trust me." Sifa stared at him. His confidence was unnerving, but something about him intrigued her. He had just publicly humiliated her ex, and for that alone, she almost wanted to thank him. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "I'll play along." Kwame smirked. "Good girl." Before she could react, he took her hand and turned to face the entire restaurant. "We're going to get our marriage certificate right now." The crowd gasped. Sifa gasped. Her mother screamed in delight. And before she knew it, Kwame was leading her out of the restaurant, straight toward the registrar's office. The registrar looked at them with thinly veiled suspicion. "Are you too sure about this?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "Marriage is not something you enter into lightly." Sifa shot Kwame a look. "You think?" Kwame, however, simply pulled out a sleek black pen and signed his name effortlessly. "We're sure." Sifa swallowed. She could still back out. But then she saw the way Kwezi stood outside, watching them, his face twisted with bitterness. Something in her snapped. She grabbed the pen and with one bold stroke, signed her name. The registrar stamped the document. "Congratulations, he said flatly. You are now husband and wife. Sifa nearly collapsed. Back at Kwame's luxurious penthouse in Kigali, reality began to sink in. What the hell did I just do? Sifa muttered to herself. Kwame poured himself a drink, completely unbothered. You married a billionaire, darling. Not many women get that chance. Sifa narrowed her eyes. Listen, Mr. Billionaire, I was just pretending back there. We are not really married. Kwame held up their marriage certificate. Legally, we are. Sifa snatched it away. This is crazy. I don't even know you. Kwame sipped his drink. Then let's fix that. She crossed her arms. You're ridiculous. Kwame set his glass down. Here's the deal. You stay married to me for 1 month. If by then you still want out, we'll get a divorce. No hard feelings. Sifa's eyes narrowed. And what do you get out of this? Kwame smirked. That's my business. Sifa hesitated. She had nothing to lose, right? It was just 1 month. Fine, she said. Kwame's smirk widened. Welcome to the Chinua Empire, Mrs. Chinua. Little did she know, she had just entered a world of power, danger, and undeniable attraction. Sifa woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the distant sound of birds chirping outside the massive penthouse windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it hit her. She was now Mrs. Chinua. She sat up quickly, her gaze darting around the luxurious bedroom. The king-size bed was way too comfortable, the silk sheets too soft, and the view of Kigali's skyline was unreal. Her new husband, Kwame Chinua, was nowhere in sight. Good. She needed to breathe. Sifa threw on a robe and walked toward the living area. Just as she reached for her phone to call her mother and figure out how to undo this madness, a deep voice stopped her. You're awake. She turned and found Kwame, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, casually leaning against the counter. His watch gleamed under the sunlight, and his confident smirk irritated her to no end. I see you're adjusting well, he said. Sifa folded her arms. This is temporary, remember? Kwame sipped his coffee. Of course, but for the next 30 days, you're my wife. You should start acting like it. Sifa scoffed. And what exactly does acting like it mean? Kwame placed his cup down and walked toward her. Simple. You'll attend business events with me, you'll live here, and in public, you'll act like you adore me. Sifa narrowed her eyes. And what happens when the month is over? Kwame leaned closer, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Then we'll see. Before she could argue, the door burst open. A tall, elegant woman stormed in, dressed in an expensive Ankara gown, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Who is she? The woman snapped, glaring at Sifa like she was a piece of dirt. Kwame sighed. Sifa, meet Bella Kamanzi. His fiancée, Bella interrupted, her eyes burning with fury. Sifa's heart dropped. What? Sifa stared at Kwame, expecting him to deny it. Instead, he simply poured himself another cup of coffee. Bella, he said calmly. I told you before, I never agreed to that arrangement. Bella's eyes flashed with pure rage. So instead of marrying me, the woman your family chose, you married this. Nobody? Sifa stiffened. Excuse me? Kwame sighed. Bella, you know I don't make decisions based on family pressure. Bella laughed coldly. You think your grandfather will accept this? You think the Chinua elders will allow you to disgrace them like this? Sifa felt sick. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was a power struggle. Kwame, however, remained unbothered. I don't care what they think. Bella turned her venomous gaze to Sifa. Listen, girl, I don't care what kind of trickery you used to trap him, but I will not let you take my place. Sifa had had enough. She stepped forward, meeting Bella's furious glare with calm defiance. I don't need to take your place because you were never in it to begin with. Bella's jaw dropped. Kwame smirked. Now this is getting interesting. Bella's hands balled into fists. This isn't over, she hissed, then turned on her heel and stormed out. Sifa let out a deep breath. Well, Kwame said, amused. That went well? Sifa turned to him. Did you know she was coming? Kwame shrugged. Bella has a talent for drama. She wouldn't let this slide easily. Sifa's blood boiled. You could have warned me. Kwame leaned back, watching her with an intense gaze. You handled yourself well. Sifa gritted her teeth. She was so done with him. I want a divorce, she snapped. Kwame's smirk widened. Not yet. The next morning, Sifa woke up to a knock on her bedroom door. Get up, Kwame called from the other side. We have an event to attend. Sifa groaned. I'm not your trophy wife, Kwame chuckled. For the next 30 days, you are. Annoyed but curious, Sifa got dressed. She chose a simple but stunning Kaitenji dress, refusing to be overshadowed by the wealth around her. An hour later they arrived at Cloud's International Hotel, where an exclusive business gala was being held. As they entered, all eyes turned to them. Whispers spread through the crowd. Is that Kwame's wife? She's not exactly what I expected. Sifa clenched her fists. Here we go again. Just then, an older man approached. His suit was pristine and his presence commanded respect. Kwame stiffened. Sifa knew immediately this was his grandfather. Kwame, the old man said coolly. So, this is your wife? Kwame nodded. Yes, grandfather, this is Sifa. The old man's eyes raked over her, his expression unreadable. Then he turned away. Sifa's heart sank. Before she could say anything, Bella appeared beside the old man, a smug smile on her face. I told you, grandfather, Bella purred. She's unworthy. Kwame's jaw tightened. Sifa exhaled slowly. She refused to let them break her. She looked Kwame's grandfather straight in the eyes and said, You don't have to approve of me, but I'm not going anywhere. The old man's eyebrows raised slightly, as if impressed. Kwame smirked. Bella, however, looked murderous. And just like that, the war had officially begun. The tension in the Clouds International Hotel ballroom was so thick, Sifa could cut it with a knife. Kwame's grandfather, Chief Chinua, stared at her with calculating eyes, his expression revealing nothing. Bella, standing beside him, smirked, waiting for Sifa to fail. Sifa, however, held her ground. You don't have to approve of me, but I'm not going anywhere, she repeated. Chief Chinua's lips curled slightly, almost amused. We shall see. He turned to Kwame. I expect you at the family estate tomorrow morning. Then, without another word, he walked away. Bella lingered for a moment, her arms crossed. You think this is over? She whispered. You'll never survive in our world. Sifa smiled sweetly. Then you'd better buckle up, Bella. You're in for a long ride. Bella's face darkened, and she stormed off. Kwame chuckled. You really do know how to push her buttons. Sifa sighed. I don't have time for her childish games. Kwame's blue suit gleamed under the chandelier lights as he stepped closer. Good, because you have bigger problems. Sifa tensed. What now? Kwame smirked. You're coming with me to the Chinua estate tomorrow. Sifa's heart dropped. What? Why? Kwame's dark eyes glowed with mischief. Because, darling, you're my wife, and it's time my family sees it for themselves. Sifa swallowed. She knew this was about more than just proving herself. The Chinua family wasn't just rich, they were powerful. And if she wasn't careful, they would eat her alive. The next morning, Sifa mentally prepared herself as their sleek black SUV pulled up to the Chinua estate, a grand mansion surrounded by acres of land. It was bigger than she imagined. The entrance alone had a fountain the size of a swimming pool with golden lion statues watching over it. Sifa took a deep breath. Remind me again why I agreed to this? Kwame smirked. Because you like a challenge. Before she could argue, a maid opened the car door. Mr. Chinua, madam, welcome. Sifa stepped out, adjusting her kitenge dress, reminding herself not to show fear. Inside, the living room looked like a palace, chandeliers, silk curtains, and paintings worth more than her entire salary combined. A group of older women sat on a grand sofa, eyeing her with suspicion. Bella was already there, sipping tea with a victorious smile. Welcome home, Mrs. Chinua, she said sweetly. Sifa clenched her jaw. Before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. So this is the woman who stole my nephew? Sifa turned and froze. A tall, elegant woman in a red lace dress stepped forward, her face full of disapproval. Kwame's Aunt Grace. Sifa suddenly realized this wasn't just a visit. This was a test, and she wasn't sure she would pass. Sifa had been through difficult situations before, but this was a battlefield. Kwame's Aunt Grace, a woman known for her sharp tongue and ruthless control over the Chinua family affairs, stared at her as if she were an insect that needed to be crushed. Sifa stood tall, refusing to be intimidated. Bella smirked from her place on the gold-trimmed sofa, clearly enjoying the show. Aunt Grace finally spoke, her voice sharp as a blade. So you're the woman who tricked Kwame into marriage? Sifa raised an eyebrow. Tricked? Funny, I don't remember forcing him to put a ring on my finger. A murmur spread through the room. Kwame hid his smirk, clearly entertained. Aunt Grace's eyes darkened. Tell me, girl, what exactly do you bring to this family? Do you have a business empire? Are you from a powerful family? Sifa smiled calmly. No, I'm just a simple woman from Kigali. Bella laughed mockingly. Exactly, a nobody. Sifa turned to Bella, her expression unbothered. You're right, Bella, I don't come from wealth, but you know what I do have? Bella rolled her eyes. Oh please, do tell. Sifa stepped forward, her voice strong and unwavering. I have Kwame's name on a marriage certificate, which means, whether you like it or not, I am now Mrs. Chinua. The room fell dead silent. Aunt Grace's jaw tightened. Kwame let out a low chuckle. I think she's answered your question, Aunt. Bella's face turned red with fury. But before anyone could say anything else, the grand doors swung open and Chief Chinua walked in. Everyone stood immediately. Sifa gulped. Here we go. Chief Chinua commanded respect without saying a word. He was tall for his age, his silver hair perfectly styled, and his traditional Agbada robe flowed with authority. His piercing eyes landed on Sifa. So, he said, his voice deep and powerful, you are my grandson's wife. Sifa felt the weight of 100 generations of expectations pressing down on her, but she refused to back down. She nodded confidently. Yes, sir. Chief Chinua studied her for a moment before turning to Kwame. You brought her here, he said, so I assume you believe she is worthy of the Chinua name? Kwame met his grandfather's gaze head-on. I do. Sifa's heart skipped a beat. Chief Chinua turned back to her. Tell me, girl, why should I accept you into this family? Sifa took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. I may not come from wealth or power, but I love and respect your grandson. I won't stand here and try to impress you with riches I don't have, but I promise you, I am not a woman who can be bullied. The room went completely silent. Chief Chinua's lips curved slightly, almost in amusement. Interesting, he said. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Sifa exhaled. She had survived, for now. Kwame leaned down and whispered in her ear, well played. Bella, however, looked like she was ready to explode, and Sifa knew this war was far from over. Sifa barely had time to breathe before Bella struck again. The moment Chief Chinua left the room, Bella stood, her face twisted with rage. You think this is over? Bella hissed, stepping towards Sifa. Sifa sighed, rubbing her temples. Honestly, Bella, don't you get tired? Bella's eyes flashed with fury. You might have fooled Kwame and his grandfather, but you will never fit into this family. Sifa smiled sweetly. We'll see about that. Bella's nostrils flared, but before she could continue, Aunt Grace suddenly spoke. We should have a proper welcome party for the new Mrs. Chinua. Kwame's head snapped up, his jaw tightening. Aunt, that's not necessary. Aunt Grace ignored him. In fact, we should make it a high society gala. Let everyone important see exactly who you've married. Bella grinned evilly. Yes, a perfect idea. Sifa immediately sensed a trap. They wanted her to fail, to embarrass herself in front of the wealthiest and most powerful people in Africa. Kwame frowned, but Sifa cut him off before he could protest. I'd love that, she said smoothly, flashing Bella a challenging smile. Bella's smirk faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. Oh, don't worry, Sifa, she said, her voice dripping with mockery. I'll even help you find a dress. Sifa tilted her head. That won't be necessary. Bella raised an eyebrow. Oh, you can afford one? Sifa leaned closer, dropping her voice so only Bella could hear. I don't need to buy a dress, Bella. I already have a billionaire husband. Bella went pale. Kwame chuckled, clearly enjoying the show. Aunt Grace clapped her hands. Good, then it's settled. The gala is in 3 days. Sifa knew she had just stepped into enemy territory, but if they wanted war, she was ready. 3 days later, Sifa stepped into the grand ballroom of the Chinua estate, and every single person in the room stared at her. She was breathtaking. She had chosen a gold and emerald kaitenje gown, a modern African masterpiece that hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair was styled into intricate braids, adorned with gold beads, and she wore minimal jewelry, just enough to enhance her natural beauty. Kwame stood beside her, dressed in a custom black tuxedo, looking every bit the billionaire king. He leaned down and whispered, They can't take their eyes off you. Sifa smirked. Let them look. As they walked through the crowd, whispers followed them. Is that really Kwame's wife? She's actually stunning. She looks powerful. Bella, standing across the room in an over-the-top designer dress, looked like she was choking on air. Aunt Grace's smile tightened, but she said nothing. Sifa had won this round, but the night wasn't over yet. As Sifa and Kwame mingled, a waiter suddenly stumbled near them, spilling a glass of red wine straight toward her dress. Sifa moved instinctively, sidestepping just in time. But she saw it, the flicker of satisfaction on Bella's face. It had been a setup. Kwame grabbed Sifa's hand, his expression dark. You okay? Sifa smiled, unshaken. More than okay. She turned and walked toward Bella. Oops, Bella said innocently. Accidents happen. Sifa smirked. You're right, Bella, accidents do happen. Then, with the elegance of a queen, Sifa accidentally stepped on Bella's dress, tearing the hem. Bella gasped in horror as the fabric ripped loudly. Sifa gasped dramatically. Oh dear, what an accident. The entire room burst into laughter. Bella's face burned with humiliation. Kwame laughed openly, wrapping an arm around Sifa's waist. That's my wife. Chief Chinua watched the entire scene, and to Sifa's shock, he smiled. As the music swelled, Kwame leaned down and whispered in her ear. Welcome to the game, Mrs. Chinua. Sifa smiled. She wasn't just playing the game anymore. She was winning it. The gala was a victory, but Sifa knew the war was far from over. The next morning she woke up to find Kwame already dressed, standing by the window, his eyes focused on the city below. You're up early, she murmured, stretching. Kwame turned, his face unreadable. I have a meeting. Sifa frowned. And? Kwame sighed. It's with my grandfather. Sifa sat up. So, you survived dinner with him, you'll survive a meeting. Kwame gave her a pointed look. You don't understand, Sifa. In this family nothing is ever that simple. Sifa narrowed her eyes. What does he want? Kwame hesitated before finally speaking. He wants me to prove our marriage is real. Sifa froze. How exactly are we supposed to do that? Kwame's gaze was serious. By moving into the Chinua family estate. Sifa's stomach dropped. Living with Chief Chinua? Under the same roof as Aunt Grace and Bella? That was suicide. Sifa shook her head. No, absolutely not. Kwame's voice softened. Sifa, if we don't do this, they'll use it as proof that our marriage is a lie. Bella and my aunt will get exactly what they want. Sifa clenched her fists. So what? I have to play the perfect wife while they try to destroy me from the inside? Kwame smirked. You're tougher than that. Sifa huffed. You have way too much faith in me. Kwame stepped closer, his fingers brushing against her bare shoulder. It's not faith, he murmured. It's just that I've never seen you lose. Sifa shivered, not from fear, but from something else entirely. Fine, she whispered. Let's move in. But deep down, she knew, this was the beginning of the real war. The Chinua estate was more than just a mansion. It was a fortress, a symbol of generational wealth and power. When Sifa and Kwame arrived with their bags, they were met with silent judgment. Aunt Grace stood at the door, arms crossed. Welcome home, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Bella, in an expensive blue kitenge dress, gave Sifa a fake smile. I hope you find your stay here comfortable. Sifa smirked. Oh, I plan to. As they walked inside, Kwame leaned toward her. I give them 2 days before they try something. Sifa chuckled. They won't need 2 days. She was right. That night as Sifa settled into the master bedroom, a maid rushed in, looking nervous. Madam, come quickly. There's been an accident. Sifa jumped up, following the maid downstairs. When she arrived, she found Chief Chinua's priceless antique vase shattered on the floor, and standing over it looking smug was Bella. The moment Bella saw her, she gasped dramatically. Oh no, Sifa, how could you? Sifa blinked. What? Bella pointed at the broken vase. She knocked it over. I saw her. The entire family had gathered. Aunt Grace shook her head. How careless. Chief Chinua stepped forward, his face cold as steel. Sifa, do you know how valuable this vase was? Sifa's heart pounded. This was a trap. Bella wanted her to take the blame, to make her look reckless and irresponsible. Kwame looked between them, his jaw clenched. Sifa exhaled slowly. Then she smiled. I didn't break it, she said calmly. Bella's smile faltered. Excuse me? Sifa walked over to the vase, crouched down, and inspected the edges. See this? She said, pointing to a piece. It was already cracked before it fell. That means someone weakened it on purpose. Bella's eyes widened. That's ridiculous. Sifa stood, tilting her head. Is it? Because you're the one who was closest to it. Bella flushed. I was just standing here. Sifa turned to Chief Chinua. Sir, you're an intelligent man. Ask yourself, who has more to gain from me looking bad? Me? Or Bella? Silence. Then, Chief Chinua sighed heavily. Enough, I'll have the security tapes checked. Bella stiffened. That's not enough. Sifa hid a victorious smile. Kwame leaned down and whispered in her ear, brilliant. Bella stormed off. Aunt Grace watched Sifa with narrowed eyes, and Chief Chinua? For the first time, he looked at Sifa not with disapproval, but interest. Maybe, just maybe, she belonged here after all. Sifa had won the battle, but the war was far from over. After the vase incident, Chief Chinua watched her closely, but not with hostility, with curiosity. She could tell he was testing her, waiting to see if she would crumble under the pressure of the Chinua family politics. But if they thought she would break, they didn't know her at all. 2 days later, a grand banquet was announced at the Chinua estate, a final test to see if Sifa could truly handle the world of power and wealth. Bella, of course, had a plan. Sifa had just finished dressing in an elegant black and gold kanji gown when a maid knocked on her door. "Madam, Miss Bella has sent you tea," the girl said hesitantly. Sifa raised an eyebrow. "Bella? Sending her tea?" Kwame, sitting on the couch, reading a business report, glanced up. "You trust it?" Sifa smirked. "Of course not." She took the cup, pretended to sip, and waited. An hour later, Bella burst into the banquet hall, screaming in agony. "My stomach!" she cried, clutching her side. "Someone poisoned me." Gasps echoed through the hall. Aunt Grace rushed forward. "What? How?" Bella turned to Sifa, her eyes blazing. "She gave me tea," Sifa laughed. "You mean the same tea you sent to my room?" Silence. Chief Chinua stiffened. "Explain." Bella turned pale. Kwame leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Bella, you wouldn't be so desperate as to poison yourself just to frame my wife, would you?" The guests murmured among themselves. Bella staggered back, realizing her mistake. "Security," Chief Chinua ordered. "Take her out." Bella screamed. "No, I'm the one who belongs here. Not her." But it was too late. Sifa stepped forward, looking Bella straight in the eye. "This was your last move," she whispered. "You lost." Bella was dragged out, her screams fading into the night. Aunt Grace stood frozen, staring at Sifa as if seeing her for the first time. Chief Chinua nodded slightly. "You're stronger than I thought," he admitted. Sifa smiled. "I told you, sir, I'm not a woman who can be bullied." That night, back in their room, Kwame pulled Sifa into his arms. "You did it," he murmured against her ear. "You survived my family," Sifa chuckled. "Barely." Kwame tilted her chin up. "I knew you would." For the first time, Sifa allowed herself to relax. She wasn't just Kwame's wife anymore, she was Mrs. Chinua. And nobody, not Bella, not Aunt Grace, not even Chief Chinua, could change that. She had fought for her place, and she had won.